to our e-commerce exchange series. As always, we're excited to dig into trending topics and ways we are helping our brands grow. I'm Nicole, Reich, our Chief Growth Officer, also your host, and joined today with our Brand Protection Manager, Andy Buss, who I've had the pleasure of working with for years, so welcome.
Thank you. Always excited to be able to talk a little brand protection, so thanks.
Yep, so before we get into the weeds too much, brand protection is a really broad phrase as it relates to e-commerce, so can you just help us understand how do you define brand protection, and then how are you helping us do that for our clients?
Yeah, that's a good point. So when we say brand protection at Blue Wheel, what we're referencing really is we kind of break it down into three stages, but they really build on each other and give us a comprehensive approach to it. And we start with an audit. Okay, so we do an audit. We'll dive into what you're doing currently as a brand. Look at the landscape, what you have going on marketplaces and across the internet. But then we get into the stages that I discussed. So stage one is, okay, what's that foundation you have? And by foundation, we're talking about your policies. Pricing policy is probably the most popular. People always come to us and they have something, usually along the lines of a pricing policy, but also the reseller policy, and that's actually the most important. So we're talking about the policies you have so we can enforce properly. And then we get into the monitoring and the enforcing, and that's it's usually pricing like we talked about. So we're monitoring and enforcing on your pricing policy. And then sellers, which are a huge hang-up, obviously, right, for most brands today. So seeing where they're selling, where they're listing, the price, again, they're selling at, and then who's really making an impact and being disruptive, and then we go after them, right? So that's kind of the third part, is enforcing and escalating when we need to. And escalation can be as far as you need to go, right, through the legal system if necessary. So that's kind of what we're talking about for brand protection.
So this is a very specific piece of our business and the services we provide, but it isn't our typical social brand presence, advertising, right? Can you help us understand why brand protection is so important for the rest of the e-com efforts that brands might implement within their organizations?
Yeah, I think I called it the pizza crust once because no one sees it, but you don't really want a pizza without it. That was I didn't trademark that yet, but I should. Because it's the underlying foundation really for a lot of the other activities on e-com, right? So if we're not protecting your brand properly, if we're not preventing against unauthorized sellers, one, your ads might not serve. For example, the sponsored product ads aren't going to serve if you're not winning the buy box, right? If the proper seller isn't in the buy box, your ads aren't going to serve. It's going to go to someone else who's pushing for that ad. Another reason is content. So if 35 sellers are pushing content for your ASINs, your listings on Amazon, for example, you don't know. There's no guarantee what's going to pop up in your content day to day, right? You want to present your brand properly. We're trying to protect that. Pricing, the margins when it comes down to dollars. I mean, that's ultimately what we're trying to protect. And so just preserving that margin, the dollars for you and your retail partners so that they stay partners, that they keep purchasing from you. So it's kind of that foundation that if you don't have it, ultimately, for most brands, you're going to eventually just see a downward spiral on the pricing, on the effectiveness of ads, on your buy box win percentage, and ultimately, on the relationship with your retailer partners.
Got it. You always mention that we have to lay that proper brand protection foundation first. Can you explain what that is and the importance of that?
So the foundation is, if anyone who's listening has heard of the First Sale Doctrine, that is basically what we're trying to overcome. So the First Sale Doctrine is a long-standing legal principle that basically says, hey, you're allowed to resell trademark product, and you're not infringing on the trademark when you sell it, right? So that's the wall that sellers often hide behind and say, hey, First Sale Doctrine, I can sell it. So what we do is equip you as a brand with the policies to overcome that, to say, actually, no, you don't get the right to sell my product because we have these policies in place that protect our trademark, that formalize what it means to be a seller for our brand and selling our trademark. And so now when we create that policy framework, along with the pricing policy, which is always a good idea for most brands, we're equipping the brand with the ability now to actually go after those sellers and overcome that First Sale Doctrine, and really take the risk and the liability for these brands to communicate to those sellers, off the table, because we've kind of secured that foundation.
Got it. So once you have that in place, what happens next? how are brands able to quantify the impact of these efforts?
Yeah, so with the policies in place, with that foundation implemented, we are then in a position to enforce them, right? To monitor, see what's going on out there, and actually take action against non-compliant sellers. So we have different tools we use, but in a nutshell, we are now equipped to both go after unauthorized sellers under that trademark kind of hook I described a minute ago, and we're also able to monitor and see who's breaking your price policy, and that's confined to authorized sellers, which is kind of a rabbit hole we could go down. But with your authorized sellers, we're going to enforce your MAP policy, and with your unauthorized sellers, we're going to go after them with whether it's cease and desist language. Maybe we just target them and call them out to you, and you have a process you want to use to go after them, but different ways and different tools to go after both those prongs, right? The pricing and the unauthorized sellers. And we have a great tool that's able to capture, the ROI really, right? Like the lost sales that you're seeing right now to unauthorized sellers, and show you how that can be diminished and how it decreases over time as we're able to go after those sellers and regather those lost sales that you might be missing to other sellers in the buy box. And there's one brand we have been working with this year that comes to mind, who, when we started sending out letters to Amazon sellers with the foundation in place, we saw their lost sales, right? So they were losing about $1,200 to $1,300 a day in the buy box to random sellers that they didn't know who they were. After about 6 months, we had that down to like $70 a day, right? That was creeping out of the buy box. So that's the kind of the goal with everyone that we're working with.
Got it. Okay, makes sense. As always, we want to tie this to our performance commerce effect, or our PCE. So within this discussion, Andy, can you explain how our brand protection impacts that PCE, or that bow tie that we talk about with all of our partners?
Yeah, so if you're looking at, awareness, interest, consumers discovering your brand, taking interest in your brand, learning more about it, this piece is really crucial. I mean, it's crucial throughout the entire bow tie, but at the beginning, if people are trying to discover what your products are, learn about them, do they want them, the content is going to be important, right? What's presented to them, how it's presented, the consistency and pricing is going to be important, because they might not be familiar with the quality of your product. And so what we're doing is removing all of the clutter. We're taking out the rogue random people who are pushing content, pushing pricing about your listings, about your products, and clearing the playing field kind of for you and your approved sellers to create that presence, to show what the content should be, to have the proper pricing in place. And then, like I said, ultimately preserve your margins. But at that intro level, I mean, you want people to see clearly what your brand is and represent it well, properly when they're trying to learn about the product.
Got it. So it's definitely within awareness and then interest, but can't even get to acquisition unless you have buy box, right? Cool. Well, Andy, as always, it's been great to sit down with you. Thank you for all of the insights for today, and thanks for joining.
Yeah, of course. This is fun.
Cool. Well, thank you all for tuning in today. Just to give you a heads up, our next session will actually be with Derek Majeski from Amazon's Buy with Prime team. I sat down with him during a session last year, and I know that there has been a ton of updates from Amazon Buy with Prime team. So we're looking forward to getting into that in the next couple of weeks. Hope everyone has a great week. Cheers.